So the new iOS update looks good at first glance, but honestly, we need to talk about this because Apple used to be the king of good design. They used to be the leaders in thoughtful user experience. I'm not sure what's going on, but we're going to get into it. So I will preface this entire video by saying that if you are new here, hello, I'm a user experience designer, have been for a while, and was a designer before that, web designer, graphic designer. So when I look at design and experiences, I'm not looking at it from the perspective of your average consumer. I can't. I'm looking at it through the lens of accessibility and usability. And don't get me wrong, some features are nice and we're going to get into all of those. But we're also going to talk about the areas where I feel like Apple has some improvements that they can make in future launches. So let's go ahead and get into it. So I, as a UX designer, cannot kick off this video without talking about the brand new design language, which is liquid glass. Apple's new liquid glass design makes iOS look like it's made of smooth, translucent layers of glass that shift and react as you move through the interface. So one of the first things that everyone is customizing to really get a feel for the liquid glass is their lock screen. Now, a lot of people will say that Apple is really trying to catch up with Android because Android for the longest has added a lot of customization features into their UX and into their UI for their phones and other devices. And a lot of people will say that Apple is now catching up. However, I will say that there is a way that you have to be thoughtful about how you allow people to customize, but nevertheless, Apple is allowing people to customize their lock screens. And so this adds another layer, an even deeper layer than the previous iOS of personalization. Now, one of the first things that I did when I downloaded the new iOS was to customize my lock screen. There's this really cool new 3D effect where it actually pulls the subject out of the image and really gives this cool 3D effect. You can also customize things like the clock by making it as large as you'd like. You can also add the liquid glass feature to the actual time that shows on your device, which is what I did, which I think is really, really cool. Customization is really important, and although a lot of people will say that Apple is just now catching up to Android, I will say that I think that Apple has been relatively thoughtful in how they allow people to customize their devices. The reason being is because when you allow too much customization, you sacrifice things like accessibility, which we're going to get to in a second. But overall, as it relates to the lock screen and all of the brand new features that we have, I would say that that's pretty good. Now let's go ahead and get into probably one of the most annoying new parts of the new iOS for me. This is just me. I'm just speaking for myself. And that is going to be the blurriness of a lot of the icons. I'm assuming that this is because of the new liquid glass, but a lot of the icons are blurry. I don't understand it. Even when you kind of swipe down and you see the liquid glass menu kind of following over the icons, I still don't understand because they're still blurry even in that sense when the liquid glass is kind of flowing over the icons or moving over the icons. So I can't for the life of me understand it. I feel like I need some 3D glasses. It kind of feels like when you go into a movie and it's 3D and you really can't see anything until you really put your glasses on and everything's all blurry. That's how I feel every time I look at my phone. I really wish Apple would fix this. I'm not sure how this relates to the new design language, but I really want them to fix it. Now, I'm sure that Apple ran a lot of tests and made sure that these icons pass accessibility standards. However, I would say it's still not great. Blurry icons also do things like cause additional cognitive load. They also do things like strain the eyes. And even though due to muscle memory, a lot of people know where their icons are positioned kind of like on each page, it still does not negate the fact that not having a very clear icon can increase that cognitive load that people have to take on when they have to try to figure out, okay, which icon is this? The icons on our phone are a core navigational element. This is something that is not just a small thing. This is a big problem that I think Apple really needs to address because again, when someone can't recognize their icons right off the bat, again, their eyes start to strain, they increase their cognitive load. This is not a good thing. And to be honest, I think that this is something that Apple should fix right away. And when I say right away, I mean in the next release. One of the other more annoying parts of the new iOS is that the search bar, whether it is in the messages or whether it is in the email, keeps moving. At first it was at the bottom, then it was at the top, now it's at the bottom again. Muscle memory is a real thing, and we as Apple users have gotten used to a certain positioning. The fact that they keep changing this on us, moving it up and down, is not helpful, and honestly, it's just frustrating. One of the things that we talk about a lot as UX designers is simply how people feel when they are using our products. And frustration is not one of the common themes that we want to continue hearing from our users. When you move things around and you break patterns, you are causing friction. Friction is another thing as UX designers that we do not want to hear from our users. We do not want to hear that users are having a difficult time using something. One of the things you also do not want is for users to be hesitant every time there is a new big release of your product or big release of your iOS or big release of your design language, because they're not going to want to download it. So when people get to the point where they don't want to adopt a new product or your new service, I think it's time to take a step back and really reassess, what are we doing here? So I told you that there were a couple of things that I actually did like. We already talked about the lock screen. The next thing is less of a new feature and more of an improvement. We're kind of going back to what we had before. And this new change happens in the Photos app. One of the points of friction from the last release when it came to photos was that people were complaining that their photos were not in order. So a lot of times when your photo would be transferred from an outside source, let's say a camera, or someone took a photo of you on their camera and they put it into, and then you transferred it into your phone or your camera roll, that phone would not necessarily show up as one of the recently added photos, like your last photo. It would show up by the date that it was taken, which was very confusing. So confusing. There are people that probably never found photos because they just did not know where to look. They didn't know when it was taken or how far back to go. And on their phones, people have thousands and thousands of photos in their camera rolls. So what Apple has now done is they have actually created a sorting filter. So now in the Photos app, you can sort by recently added or you can sort by date captured. You can also do some filtering as well, which we've been able to do in the past, but filtering has also been added here. And you also have some different view options, like the ability to kind of zoom in. We had this ability in the past, however, you just kind of use your fingers to kind of zoom in and out. However, Apple is now giving you that in the controls. They've also split up your library, which is going to be all of your photos, and your collections. Collections are things like memories and pinned photos and albums and shared albums and different things like that. Those are now separated into two different tabs, which makes it a very clean user experience. This update of the Photos app almost had to happen because who doesn't love their Photos app and who doesn't actually want to find their photos? Findability is another thing that we talk about in UX. It is very important. Are users actually able to find things? If they can't find things, then they're not going to use it. So I'm so glad that they fixed this. And let me know how you feel about this in the comments. Again, these are my opinions, but I want to know what you think. So the next big update in the new iOS is going to be the ability to add photos in the backgrounds of your text message threads. Now, I'm very, very curious as to see how you guys feel about this because I have some pretty strong opinions about this. I don't like it. I don't like it because, number one, accessibility. From all of the photos that I have tried to use, backgrounds, a lot of the photos that you may want to use from your camera roll, from let's say your vacations or, you know, something funny or just, you know, whatever it is, I think it kind of changes based on, the image kind of changes based on the text message thread, kind of like who you're texting with or who the group chat is, you know, is with or, you know, whatever. I don't like it because I feel like the accessibility has gone down. It is very, very difficult to see, you know, who said what did I say, what did you say, because this background to me does not have enough control. I don't like it because you can't see anything, and to me that does not feel like good, responsible design. One of the things that I always admired about Apple when it came to their design principles, and I felt like the principles that they lived by when it came to actually designing their products, was that they were very responsible. I feel like this is not super responsible. I feel like this is a reaction to what other companies are doing and allowing their users to do. But I always feel like Apple kind of held themselves to a certain standard and would not allow something like this. A lot of the backgrounds, and again, it is really going to depend on the background that you choose, the image that you choose. However, a lot of these backgrounds, you just can't see anything. So the accessibility goes down, which we'll get to. The accessibility goes way down. The confusion is way up. And to me, it's not an enjoyable experience to text with someone and remind myself of what did I say, what did they say, what the tap back was. I can't see anything. And if you can't do something as simple as clearly see your text messages or what's happening in your text thread, what are we really doing? So for the sake of this conversation, I started a text thread with myself just so that I can show you guys. And what I did is I put a few different backgrounds in the text message thread so that I could show you guys. One of them is a background of my travels, I think somewhere in Rome. And this is what it looks like. To me, doesn't look great. So for me, part of what this is that this UI along with these pictures is just very busy. These backgrounds make the experience very busy. And as someone, like I'm sure a lot of you whose lives are just very busy and sometimes chaotic, I don't want to not be able to see my text messages when it's time for me to go to my phone. And if I can't clearly see my text messages, or I just feel a sense of anxiety or that things are just very busy on the screen, I'm not going to feel very calm when I'm using this app. Next, I actually changed the background to one of the backgrounds that Apple suggests. They give you kind of these preset images. And this one is going to be a kind of like under the sea background. Now, this one is not too bad, I'll be honest. However, what I will say is that because the background itself, the image has a lot of white in it, a lot of times the white text like the dates and things like that are not able to easily be seen. They gave you a little bit of a drop shadow, but still it's just not as clear. And again, when we talk about things like accessibility, and if someone who, I feel like I have pretty good eyesight, I feel like I really don't struggle too much. My eyesight is not perfect. Someone whose eyesight is maybe not as strong or has different abilities, no matter what they might be, also might struggle with this as well, and might struggle even more. So next we're going to try one more, and this is going to be another preset image that Apple has given us. This image is a little darker, and I will say that if you are looking to find an image that works, I would either go with something that is really dark or really light, very similar to the original, kind of white background. So this one is not too bad. I think that the readability here is a lot better. The white text definitely shows up a lot better, obviously on black backgrounds, as it will on a white background. So those are just kind of my thoughts. If you are looking to increase the readability of your text messages, if you want to be able to use these backgrounds, I would highly recommend going with something really light, closer to white, or something really dark. Now, I know a lot of you are probably going to say, well, you don't have to change the background if you don't want to. That's actually not the point. The point is that as designers, it is incumbent upon us to think about whatever the worst case scenarios might be and design for those. So I kind of feel like that's where the breakdown is. I feel like there was a lot of probably principles and thought around letting people kind of do whatever they wanted to do, and however it looks, it looks. And while I think that, yes, that goes into like the full customization of things, I think that if the design and if the user on the other side isn't receiving it in the way that you intended it, if it's not working for them, if they can't see, is it really a win? I don't know. That's a conversation that designers, UX designers have to have. So the next thing is actually going to be the contact names. And where we see this show up is actually in the messages. Again, the contact names are a lot larger, and so are the backgrounds around the contact name. It just feels like there's a lot of space. There's more space and real estate being taken up on the Messages app than there was before. It feels a lot less modern now. It feels a little bit clunky, and I'm not really feeling it. To me, it also feels unbalanced and a bit of a distraction from the actual conversation itself. Everything is just so big. Now, in design, typography hierarchy is a thing. As you move down the page, things should get smaller. So in theory, names can be a little bit larger. However, this just feels really large. And it almost kind of distracts from the conversation itself. That was just one of the things that I noticed right off the bat. And to me, it didn't feel like Apple. Now, one last thing that I've heard a lot about, and I'm interested to see if you guys have heard about this. I don't know that I've experienced it, but I'm going to start to pay attention, is the battery drainage. Now, we see this happen often with a new iOS. And oftentimes they'll say, oh, well, you just have to get the new phone and you'll have a better battery. Not necessarily Apple saying that, but that'll be kind of what people will say to fix the battery problem. And who knows? So let me know if you have been experiencing this issue. I've heard some people say that their battery is draining faster. If this is true, I hope that this is corrected and fixed in the next release. So that's my take. Some things that I like and some things that I think really hurt the usability and the accessibility with this new iOS. So let me know what you think. Is Apple still leading in design? Apple used to be the king of design languages. Their new iOS, would come out and everyone was so excited. Are you guys still excited? Is this something that you still look forward to? When the new iOS comes out, do you feel like you have a new phone? I think that that was a lot of the excitement around the iOS over the years, is that you feel like you kind of had an upgrade or you got a new phone. Are you guys still feeling that way, or do you think that Apple is starting to slip? We can have these conversations. Let me know in the comment. And also let me know what your favorite and least favorite feature are of the new iOS. I'll see you guys in the next video.